Hi, I'm Reed, this is Crowline Publishing, and welcome back to Lore, which is our series on taking folklore, mythology, social custom, legend, all that sort of stuff, and like a bunch of cultural pirates stealing it for our tabletop role-playing games. And today we're talking about trees. Now, trees are very, very important to pretty much every human culture that there's ever been, both in terms of industry and religiously and spiritually. Trees are hugely important in the human imagination, and so narrowing this down was enormously difficult. So I've decided to do 5 specific magic and sacred trees, and then we're going to talk about some ideas on how to make them gameable. So here we go. Trees. Number 1 is the Narraton Tree, and we're going to start off a little bit rude here. It's going to get raunchy. So one day, Indra is the god of good and the king of the gods, and he's the fighter of evil. He wants to create a pavilion in a forest for his wife, Vesantara, and for his kids. So in his human manifestation, he goes off into the forest to collect wood. But there's yogis in the forest. In this particular case, we're talking about people with spiritual and magical powers, so, wizards. And these yogis had spent a lot of time conquering all their weaknesses which gave them this power, except for lust. They were horn dogs. And they wanted to get with Vesantara, and Indra didn't want that to happen, but he still needed to go into the woods. So to deal with them, he creates the 12 Narraton trees, and these trees bear fruit in the shape of Vesantara. So what would happen is that Indra could go into the woods, and Vesantara would throw these fruits at these freakish yogis, and they would run off with them, and they would make love to them in the forest, to the weird fruits. But anyway, eventually Vesantara dies, and so there's no real need to pluck the Narraton trees anymore. So the fruits have time to ripen, and they eventually come alive, and they become young women, young sort of fairy spirits, and they are known for their love of singing and dancing. And to this day, Narraton charms are very popular in Thailand, where they're quite religious still, and the myth is a big deal, and you wear Narraton amulets, and you have Narraton icons that are especially devoted to protecting the virtues of young women and faithful wives. Number 2, the Calper Tree. Speaking of Indra, he loved trees, including one version of the World Tree. Now, the World Tree is a myth common to many cultures. You've seen Thor, you know what it is. The idea is the universe is basically in the shape of a tree, and the various worlds, the heavens and the hells and all that, are in the branches. So I've heard a few versions of the story of the Calper Tree, which I really hope I'm saying correctly. Apologies if I am not. It's just me. But anyway, here's the version I know. If you know a different version, please comment and let me know. So in the beginning of the world, the Calper Tree was one of the first things ever made, and it was a wishing tree. And it's said to be very, very beautiful with colors like gemstones and precious metals. And if you could eat of the fruit of the Calper Tree, you could make a wish. That's how it's often translated, but it's more that it's not just a wish. You get connected to the power of the Devas, the power of the gods. And the Devas, the gods, keep the Calper Tree safe from the Asuras, the demons. And in those days, there's a huge war going on over these incredibly powerful cosmic wishing trees. So eventually humans are allowed to have some of the fruit in these sort of early days of prelapsarian wonder. But of course, they abuse it and they wish for evil things. So Indra grabs the tree and takes it up to heaven, and we can see it now because it is the Milky Way. So there you go. Wishing trees that the gods protected and the demons wanted, and we humans messed up, unsurprisingly. Number 3, Zakum. We were in heaven, now we are in hell. This one is my fave. Verily, the tree of Zakum will be the food of the sinful like molten brass. It will boil in their insides like scalding water, and a voice will cry, "Seize ye him, and drag him into the midst of the blazing fire, then pour over his head the penalty of boiling water." Jahannam is the Arabic word for hell. Now, hell in Islamic tradition is mainly fire, although there is also the hell of breaking to pieces and the abyss, both of which sound pretty cool. But in all of hell, there is one tree that is called Zakum. It is the only thing to eat, the terrible, weird, skull-shaped seeds. But if you eat them, you greedy and foolish hellfire person, you damned soul, it is like getting a bellyful of boiling water. And I think this is quite fascinating. If only a drop of al-Zakum were to drip into the abode of the world, it would spoil the people's livelihood. So how about the person for whom it is his food, reads the Quran. Now, I've also read a blog that was written in Arabic and just Google translated, so, that suggests that the fruit of the tree, and you can see it on the video now if you want to see the weird skull-shaped pods, are the actual devil's power. So there you go, Zakum, the one tree in hell. Number 4 is Jiboko, Japanese for tree child. Jiboko are a kind of yokai, which is their word for supernatural entity, any kind of ghost or demon or monster or whatever, yokai. Now, Jiboko are not a specific kind of tree. It's just a bad tree. It's a tree that has been turned to evil, and all that needs to be done to turn them into this evil yokai is being near blood, death, and blood. Now, what happens is that it's sucked up through the roots, and it turns them evil, and often you find Jibokos near battlefields because, say, the blood of an army really gets into the soil, sucks it up into the tree, and the tree becomes vampiric, and suddenly it thirsts for more of the claret. Now, the deal is that you look for skeletons near trees, and if you can see one, presumably one that's been quite horribly mutilated, that's your warning sign that a Jiboko is near. Now, if you miss this warning sign, the Jiboko will grab you, pierce you, and drink its fill of your blood. Then after the bugs have eaten the rest, it will drop you and leave your bones to bleach, and you will be a warning that the vampire tree is near. Number 5, Dedona. In the mountains of Epirus, up in northern Greece, an incredibly reliable historian Herodotus tells us there was an oracle, the most ancient of all the Hellenic oracles. The Greeks love oracles, the prophets of the gods, things or people that can understand the will of Zeus and the gods and tell humans what they are. I've seen 300, they float around with no pants on. Well, not really, because the Dedona is a mighty oak. It's sacred to the mother goddess. We're not quite sure which mother goddess, but it was probably Rhea or Gaia, the earth herself. Later on, it was rededicated to Zeus, because that's just how Zeus do. But now I actually really find this quite a beautiful image. The Seloi, who are the order of the priests, who interpret the will of the gods, do it by going up to the Dedona and listening carefully to the sound of the wind through the leaves and the branches striking one another. And they say it sounded like wind chimes. And interpreting that music, which is what an oracle does, or what the priests of the oracle do, is to understand the will of the gods. Dedona is actually quite important to Greek mythology as a whole. Odysseus, he goes to Dedona when he's returning from his great voyage because returning to his wife properly is something that the gods need him to do. And the Argo, the ship of the Argonauts go on a huge big adventure, a kind of Avengers of the Greek mythology, has wood from the Dedona in the hull, so the ship itself can give them prophecies. So there we go. 5 different kinds of trees. Now it's time for 5 different adventure seeds. We're going to get nerdy now. Number 1. Your PCs need to get a prophecy from a tree, or at the very least a tree-based creature. Or maybe just the oracle of the trees, which means a cool adventure into the forests, and then when you get to the tree on the oracle, they need your help. They can't just tell you, so you've got to go and somehow please a tree. Maybe it needs something special to feed its roots. Maybe it's blood, maybe it's magical water, maybe it's a kind of animal sacrifice. Either way, you can then go and have a cool, interesting plant-based adventure, or fight some evil druids or something. Bearing in mind that you're probably going to hear the word shrubbery 10,000 times, because that's just how gamers are. But getting a prophecy from a tree, cool idea for an adventure. Number 2, a little bit philosophical here. So say that you do need to talk to a tree or a tree god or a weird sect of unhelpful druids or a vegetable elemental or anything. You'd have to go and learn the language, and the best way to do that would be from something that lives in the world of the humans and the trees, like, say, the weird fruit golem women of the Narraton Tree. So the PCs must not only find a seed of this magical tree, they must cultivate it and grow it, and then they've got an entirely new form of intelligent life. Now from there, you can learn to talk to the tree language, fine, but here's where it gets interesting. The creation of life is not so simply done. Read Frankenstein, read Aron, or the Arthur Machen story, the great god Pan, or the story of the flower lady from Welsh myth, who I will absolutely not attempt to pronounce her name. You are responsible for this life, aren't you? Haven't you created something that is bound to you and you are bound to it? And also, what could a Narraton child, half flower, half woman, want from its life? And what will your PCs think about suddenly having something that they are deeply responsible for that's maybe not a good guy running around the campaign world? Their fault. Number 3, simple location-based adventure this time. A local bigwig has vanished in the forest. They never left, there's no signs of them leaving, and they need to be found and rescued, or at the very least buried. And of course, the bigwig has perished at the... well, not the hands, obviously, but the twigs. The local bigwig has perished at the twigs of the Jiboko tree. And worse, it has kept the bigwig's soul, so it's not that simple as just getting the body. And then, when the players figured out the tale of the ancient bones, they understand what the Jiboko tree is, you reveal that all the trees have bones. It's not just a vampire tree, this is a vampire forest. Fun time getting out, lads! Number 4. In hell, the fruit of the Zakum tree grows, and when brought to earth, the fruit is a monstrous bane, an artifact of absolute evil, and someone very bad and someone very powerful with a mad and horrific plan is out to steal the fruit, and when it comes to the world, as we heard from the Quran, it will utterly defile humanity. Can your players manage to get into hell, survive the fire, survive the abyss, survive the hell of being torn apart, and then have a showdown with whoever it is that's powerful enough to steal from hell itself? I mean, you'd have a bloody fight scene that makes Obi-Wan and Anakin look like they're having a pinch fight near a sparkler. The other thing is that you could just make one of the fruits of the Zakum tree the source of all the evil in a campaign. I think Zakum trees are cool, and I think that you should use the fruit. I think it's a really interesting and unique kind of artifact of evil, which is usually just the eye of the evil god. Number 5. Up there in heaven, in the stars, is a place where the gods live. And up there is a fruit that grows on a magical tree that can work miracles. Someone important, some patron god or king or emperor, has asked your PCs to go into that higher realm and to bring back this fruit, which can make a wish to save his beloved princess or his son or his husband or whatever. Are you willing to take on the gods and violate their realm to save your friend or your master? And do you think that having the power of God or a single wish would corrupt your players? Give a pure wish to a PC. Tell them it will work. Say, look, I'm not going to screw you over. Here is a wish. If you can get to this magical tree and pluck this fruit, you will be able to do whatever you like. Just give it to them and see what they do. So I originally had some different adventure ideas for the sexy fruit ladies. Maybe one day I'll do a Crowland After Dark, but that is not today. So there you go. 5 magical trees, 5 adventure ideas. I hope this was useful. Why don't you give me a like or a share or a subscribe? Tell your friends. I'm Reed. This is Crowland. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.